Hello, everyone. We've had a chance to meet most of you, but if you don't remember, we're the ODOT people, and kind of our goal with our interactions with CTEC is to kind of give you guys a project to work on that's maybe a little bit less academic and a little bit more real world that can incorporate a lot of the curriculum and stuff that people in high school need to do, but hopefully in a more exciting way. So we've worked with the CTEC staff and your teachers to try to figure out good ideas of what projects, and we kind of decided on like kind of throwing you in the deep end. In the goal of the project is at the end of it for you to produce a industry standard geospatial product that is essentially being sold on the market today. So what you'll learn hopefully will be directly applicable to the geospatial industry. But if you aren't interested in the geospatial industry, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that all of the skills that you learn will translate into whatever industry you wind up pursuing. So I think first off, we'll get started with Audrey has some kind of visuals that'll do a better job of explaining what this kind of project is going to entail and kind of what it looks like than anything I could say. So I think I'll just hand it off to Audrey.
Thanks, Brett. Devin, I think I sent you the PowerPoint. So we just kind of wanted to give you some visuals and kind of a background on what the data is for, what project we were using this data for, so that you kind of have a sense of the purpose and what drives us in our group and what would drive you. So this is a just project background. This is where it's located. It's in Minam. It's a small community in northeastern Oregon near the Wallowas. And it's got a pretty nasty highway that goes through it, a lot of tight winding turns that are actually pretty dangerous. Devin, if you want to go to the next slide. Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yes, I'm on the third slide.
Oh, it's only showing me, we can only see the preview version, not the actual PowerPoint. I'm just looking at the first slide here.
Uh-oh. All right, we will.
No problem.
Okay. Second slide?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you. So, all right, perfect. So this is what we're talking about. This is a section of that curve that we are looking at in particular along the highway. You can see it's got a huge drop off with a really steep slope and has unfortunately caused a lot of accidents and some cars to go off the road. This is an example of a truck that we actually observed with some of our aerial photographs that had crashed and went off the road and slid down the slope and came to rest at the bottom. So this is what ODOT was concerned about, and this was the underlying purpose for the entire project, was what could we do to create a safer road that would prevent this from happening again. So third slide. So this is an aerial view of the curve and slope in question that we were working on. The site is just referred to as Minam. And like you can see, it's got that really tight curve. And what ODOT wanted to do was start digging away at the toe of this slope. So cut into the hillside and remove all that material so that they could construct and, you know, repave a road that had a gentler curve to hopefully prevent more people from going off the road and being injured or dying. So that's the underlying purpose here. And so, but that's a lot of material they got to move. So next slide. That was one of the biggest things that they needed to keep track of. They were moving huge amounts of, removing huge amounts of rock, dirt, soil every day. And this was a lengthy project. So they needed to know what they were going to do with this material. You know, like when they remove it from the site, there's not just a dump site for everything. They had to plan for where they were going to put it, how they were going to construct whatever they were going to construct with it. So that's kind of where we came in to help with that construction monitoring and volume assessment, essentially. So next slide. So we went out there first, before any kind of construction happened, to collect imagery to see what it looked like before anything. And then every month while they were constructing, we would go out and fly and collect more imagery. And we'd also lay down targets and shoot those in with our survey equipment so that they were geospatially correct. And that's actually in the bottom right corner. That's an image of our one and only Mike Brinton with CTEC alumni Haley Smith helping collect some of that information. So we went out there every month collecting this data so that we could basically create models that calculated the exact volume of material that they were removing from that slope. And so they were able to plan for and kind of scope out what the rest of the project would look like. Next slide. So this is the result. We got some 3D, from those images, we were able to create 3D models that we could overlay on top of each other and see the difference. So on the bottom, you'll see them overlaid on top of each other, a cross section of that slope. And the July is on top, August is on the bottom, and kind of the greenish yellow. And so you can see there's a considerable amount of difference, and there's a lot of material being moved around every month. And it would be pretty hard to calculate exactly what's been removed and what's been added, you know, total, without doing something as exhaustive as what we were able to do. So this was really something that was very valuable to the construction crew. They were able to get this data quickly turned around after we would go out and collect it every month, and, you know, help them construct a safer road ultimately. And so that's kind of what we're going to be expecting from the crew at CTEC, is making deliverables like this so that we can make these types of calculations and not only have really good visuals to show what project progress looks like, but give, you know, very accurate data information for further planning. So it's a lot of fun work, and there are a lot of moving pieces involved, but I think that this is going to be a good challenge and a fun project for you guys. That's all I got there. I think Rhonda's going to talk about now the roles and responsibilities that we had within our group and what we were expected to do on site and in the office and how we were all involved in that. Yeah, so Rhonda.
Yeah, so I'm just going to talk really quick about the different project roles in a remote sensing project such as the MINEM curve, but this will also be applicable to you guys in your class project. So the first role I'm going to talk about are the project managers. So the project manager is what I like to think of as the communicator. So they are in constant communication from the get-go with the client to figure out what the project needs are. and what the scope of the project is, what's wanted, what's needed, and to work with the client on what the project is going to be. And then after that, they are in constant communication with the field operations crew, with the project site, if the land that the project is on is owned by someone, or if it's a road, then with the DOT. If it's a construction site, then with the construction company. And so they're just in constant communication with those people, and they're also time budgeting. So they're figuring out how much time it's going to take to develop a quote for the project. So they're dealing with the money, and then they schedule the field crew or the field operations crew for the field work based on the scope of the project. And so then the field crew, they are in charge of planning. So once they know the scope and the extent of the project and what's needed, then they are going, if it's a UAS project, they will do the flight planning. And then once they have kind of a flight plan planned out, then they figure out the coordinate system needed that goes along with the survey data collection. So all the little details needed for the actual data collection is what the field operations are going to deal with. And then after that, dealing with the equipment, you need to make sure everything's up to date. So all the equipment maintenance, the charging batteries, packing lists, and then getting into the actual project, they need to make sure they're going to be FAA Part 107 compliant with their data collection. So whether they need a flight authorization for that area, or whatever they need. And then they also need to develop a safety plan. So for that specific site, you need to have the proper personal protective equipment. So if you need a hard hat, if it's a construction site, obviously a vest, and all the PPE needed for that site. And then once they're on site, they're responsible for communication with the construction foreman. If it's a construction site like Minam, they're operating machinery throughout the whole thing. So you have to be in contact with them. It's really important so that everyone is safe. And then the final thing they're responsible for is checking the data before you leave the site. So, so that nothing gets left out. If one picture didn't get taken that needed to be, you don't want to have to drive 8 hours across the state to go back and get that. And then, so far we have the project manager and the field operations crew. The next person I'm going to talk about is the data processor. So once they've collected the data and you're back in the office, the data processor, they need to know what the field crew did to collect the data, and then they're going to take that data and do the standard processing. So they need to know the camera specs, what platform was used to collect the data, and then they need to keep everyone on the team involved and updated for how long it's going to take them to process the data, and then make the deliverables. So the deliverables could be anything from just a video of the site or a orthomosaic, but it could also be, like Audrey was showing with Minam, it could be volume calculations, it could be reality meshes, whatever the client wants. So the data processor creates the deliverables. And then after that, we have the report writer. So the report writer documents the project from start to finish, everything from what the initial request was, what the client wanted, to how the data was collected in the field, how it was processed, and then the files that were delivered, and they communicate that with the client at the end. So the kind of all the roles we have on a project are the project manager, the field ops, the data processor, and the report writer. And so Brett is going to talk about how these roles overlap and how important communication is.
Thanks, Rhonda. Yeah, so as you can see, this is like a pretty beefy project, and it was one of the first projects that I started working on when I first got a job at ODOT, and it's been going on for over a year now. We go out every month to continue monitoring this progress, the progress of the project. And even to this day, it's like intimidating. You know, I go out there and think like, oh my God, how there's like only 4 people basically participating in this project. How are we gonna? This is a huge deal, you know. But it takes a team. You know, there's no way that any one of us could do what we could do it by ourselves. And you know, my background is more in like the field side, the data acquisition side, and flying and stuff. So I do most of the field work. But Audrey and Rhonda also spend time in the field, and even though like Audrey's background is a little bit deeper in data processing and calibrating, and Rhonda works a ton with you know, calibrating LiDAR and other pretty intense deliverables, but they do field work too, because you know, we're kind of a small section in an organization, and we have to, you know, even if my job is the field person, and you know, if Audrey's job is the data processor, when there's only, you know, 4, 5, 6 people to take on a large undertaking, everybody pitches in wherever they can. And that's how the vast majority of companies work, especially if they're small companies. Then, you know, almost if it's a really small startup or something, then really nobody specializes in anything. Everybody does everything. But the point is that it takes a team. There's no way that anybody could do this by themselves. So that, you know, one of the big things that we want you to take away from this project is teamwork, and that whether you pursue something geospatial or not, teamwork will apply everywhere you go. So, you know, a lot of these roles, they bleed over quite a bit. The project manager, you know, has to be familiar enough with all of the field operations, and with flying, and with data processing, and with report writing, so that when us, the agency, come to you, we're going to treat you guys like a small company. When we come to you and we want an update, or we have a question, or something changes on site and we have to amend the contract, then we need to know exactly what's been done and what's not been done, so that we can make decisions about, you know, how to change the contract, or, you know, if there was an emergency on site that changes the game for both us, the agency, and you, the company. And the project manager has to know enough about all of those processes and participate in those processes to speak clearly and with a level of knowledge about it. The field ops people, kind of same deal. They have to know enough about where their data is going. You know, when I'm in the field, I have to understand how Audrey is going to process the data in order to collect good data. If I have no idea how the data is going to be processed, there's a really good chance that all of the driving and the travel and the flying will be useless, and we'll have to go all the way back out there to do it again. And that's happened to me before, for sure. I've made that mistake many times. The data processor, they have to be aware of the field ops. You know, if the data processor needs, you know, higher and higher quality data, you know, Audrey needs to know that the drone can only do so much. You know, a drone is not a microscope. If we have to get closer and closer and closer to our target, Audrey has to have a realistic idea of what you can actually do with a drone. So then, therefore, what field people can do. And also, she has to be familiar with, you know, the next step, which is the report writer. If, you know, a lot of times when you get into a highly technical industry like this one, a lot of the people that do field ops and data processors, I mean, they're like brilliant engineers. And so their communication skills can sometimes be pretty lacking. So if you're a report writer and you need information from, you know, this like savant data processor person, that can be pretty difficult. So Audrey needs to be familiar with what is expected to go into the report, so that she can, you know, snag eye candy and take screenshots as she goes through the whole process of reporting. That can help paint a picture to us, you know, the people who are paying for the product. And the report writer has to be familiar, similar to the PM, very similar jobs. They have to be familiar with all of it, so that they can write about it clearly and deliver a final report that sums up what we did and how we did it and how we didn't do it, and all of that stuff. So it really takes a team. You guys will be in groups, you know, that mimic a small company. So each of you will probably have a specialty of some kind. so that you can just, divide and conquer. You can break the project into digestible chunks, and then each person, take on their own chunk, but they'll still inevitably be needed to help complete this body of work within a single semester. So unfortunately, we would love to have you guys come all the way out to Mineham and like fly it yourselves. That would be awesome. But I mean, that's an active construction site. There's no way we could do that. Plus it's, 6 hours away. But what we have is we have real world data to give you. So we'll work with you on flying some projects, on flying drones. But unfortunately this year, we can't have you fly a project and then deliver that project's data. I mean, that would be cool. That'd be the best if you guys could fly the site yourselves and then produce the data. But due to the coronavirus and limitations that we had on the project for you this year, we can't do that when you guys are seniors. So we'll give you the data and we'll work with you on field ops as well. But at the end of this, the product that you'll produce, that we're setting you up to produce, will could compete on the open market. After that's pretty much all I've got. I know we've got some time constraints today, so I kind of want to open the floor up to Chris Glantz if you have anything to add, or also Q&A from the students. If you guys have questions or whatever, feel free to ask them at any time.
I don't have a ton to add, Brett, but maybe you had mentioned, you had said eye candy. Could you maybe fill in a little bit what that means in our industry?
That's a really good question. Yeah, so eye candy. So a lot of the times, I'll be working in CAD or some, program, and the stuff that I'll be working on is pretty visually appealing. And eventually, when I deliver the product, the customer is probably going to want to know like how it got delivered. And also it's good kind of marketing material for us. A lot of the kind of airborne work with drones and stuff is like kind of sexy work. And so you might as well use that for your own advertising. And so you take screenshots, and I mean, I love photography. I bring my camera with me like everywhere I go to get cool shots of what we're doing, so that, later when we have to give a presentation, we have plenty of cool pictures, or for the final report, especially, then you can put really cool pictures into it that not only are, they're cool and they're visually appealing and they're better than text. They also tell a story of how we produced what we produced, so that the customer can just, flip open that report and be like, oh, right, okay, they flew a drone, they flew that drone. The site is in the desert. It's a really big site that they're excavating all this material from. And, oh, we see there's these hazards, as clear as day. That's why the site, safety plan looked the way it did. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, whether it's a screenshot or a picture with a camera. So yeah, I hope that explains it.
Yeah, I thought that did a good job, Brett. Yeah, I just would echo that there's more than one way of communicating the work that you produce than just simple text or a narrative. From my experience, a typical customer isn't going to want to read the entire narrative of what you did. So if anything, reports I've seen multiple places where they almost duplicate maybe the standards or the specifications, they'll put it in a table or in some sort of photo or image in addition to the narrative itself. So, everybody is different. I'm not that detail oriented. So what I like to do is I'll skim through everything, where Rhonda might read every single word in a research paper or report. She's laughing because it's true. Yeah, so you want to try to capture your audience. You can't capture everybody, but you want to try to capture what the customers might want. And if you don't know, you could ask. So I was just reminded about 15 minutes ago that no one could answer yes or no to a question that's never been asked. So if you are questioning it, then more than likely either we haven't explained it properly, or we haven't thought about it either. So especially if there's something that might cause some sort of hurdle in a project or whatnot. I think there was a perfect example of, especially working on a team, a perfect example of communicating with clients. Brett and I were on a call about a couple hours ago, that I was explaining some process that we have, some deliverables that we can create, and I missed this very fundamental component to acquisition. And Brett was there to remind the clients and me of this really fundamental component. And so I thought that's a perfect way of, having a team. Everybody has this diverse background on how they think and how they process and how they see the lens that they see the world through. So, communicate, over communicate potentially. So, I don't really have any other thing to add. And so besides, we're really excited to work with this group, and it's really cool. It's really cool to watch how this project or our interaction with this program morph over time. And so, we're looking for feedback too. So we'll see how this looks as we progress through.
Yeah, we have students that are posting questions. Julian, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
So because you guys are, I don't know if you guys are working still or not, but if you guys are, what precautions are you guys taking because of COVID-19? Are you working at home? Are you guys doing 6 feet apart, or are you just doing the same thing that you guys have been doing since the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, all of us are working from home. First off, I typically never wear a t-shirt to work, which is a telltale sign of that or a hat really. So we're all working from home. I'm guessing the section that we work in has 25 employees, and there's only 2 of them that are working in the office at this time. So it gives you an idea. 90% of us are working from home. ODOT as a whole, I think we have 4,500 employees, and there's, I think, roughly 3,000 of us working from home. So it's been a strain on our systems. When we do need to work in the field, we do take precautions. Typically field work, we'll drive individual vehicles, not our personal vehicles, but there will be a single person in a vehicle, which is not terribly efficient. However, it keeps everybody safe. There's processes around disinfecting and cleaning workspaces, any equipment that might be touched by more than one person. We maintain the physical distance. There's mask requirements. So basically anything you see in the CDC, we're following that to a T for the most part. And if anything, being a state agency, we're held to a higher standard than a traditional place. And so that's a great question. Thanks for asking.
All right, I have a question from another student. He said, do you foresee an increase in commercial drone piloting jobs after the COVID-19 pandemic has ended?
That's a fascinating question. I guess if I had a crystal ball, I probably wouldn't be working at the moment, but I think that I think there's gonna be, I'm foreseeing our work spiking as soon as we get back to, or as soon as we morph into some version of what our work looks like. We've had a lot of stuff put on hold, and it's basically building, it's a dam building work. And so once there's some release, that's gonna be a wave that hits us. That's internally to ODOT. It's really hard to say because of the economy, what's going to happen, what kind of ripples this pause in life has created. I'm guessing their work will morph somehow, and there's already been an increase in remote pilots over the last couple of years. So I foresee that continuing to grow, especially since. There was talks about mounting some sort of thermal sensors to UAS to track the temperature of citizens, and so, which is kind of scary if you ask me. However, you know, delivering, what kind of companies that are out there delivering stuff. At the moment, the Federal Aviation Administration rules are limiting quite a bit to this last mile kind of delivery, the things that you hear from Amazon wanting to deliver packages. But I can see that being a potential resource as we progress, delivering packages where we don't have to have as much human interaction for some of these sort of daily mundane tasks. Yeah. I don't know if Brett or Audrey or Rhonda have some insight on that.
I think that it is, like Chris said, it's going to be hard to tell what's going to happen in the economy, and that's, you know, that's one of the biggest influences on the job market at all. But regardless of the pandemic, like kind of two things are happening in the drone world that affect, I think, jobs there. Number one, they're getting easier to operate. So that means, like, you know, less jobs, unfortunately, because more and more people can do it, you know, almost recreationally, almost like they're toys. However, at the same time, it's like kind of the wild, wild west right now about trying to figure out all the different things that drones can do in a significantly more efficient way, which then increase the demand for jobs. You know, like this particular job, we could do this without drones. We would use traditional surveyors, and instead of the drones, you know, taking aerial photos and then processing that data into a 3D model, we would go make a 3D model on foot, point by point, with a GPS or a total station or some other survey instrument, like on a rod, and we would be walking around out there. I mean, and it would probably take, I don't know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks to accomplish what we do in 1 day with a drone. And that's just in the land survey profession. There are many other professions that are just now discovering things that drones can do that make them more efficient. So it's, I mean, it's like impossible to tell all the different things that people will hire pilots for. But that number of different things is certainly going to go up.
So thank you, guys. Julian, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your next question.
Okay, my second question is another COVID-19 question, and it is, how do you plan on helping others with the profession that you guys are in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's not something that we think about often because we deal with points and lines on the computer screen. However, you know, for example, the work that we do, I'm thinking of this project down on the southern coast in Oregon. It's called the Hoos-Canadian Slide. And it essentially eliminated a section of our highway about a quarter mile, fell into the ocean. And so even though we just collected the points and lines and created this topographic map of the area, the downstream effect is something that's kind of it's hard to really determine, and really it's opened back up commercial trucking access to someone's home potentially. Another project that comes to mind was, this happened right before I started working for the private company that I was at right before ODOT. The same one that Brett and Audrey worked for. There was a huge landslide in Washington called the Oso landslide, which was in, I think, 2014-ish. And that company almost immediately went and flew aerial LiDAR over this huge landslide. It was devastating. There was a lot of deaths. And so essentially the data then our data informs those that are making these decisions. Is it safe to go in? How much area do we need to excavate? How much, where can we actually access? You know, when ODOT has a slide on one of our highways, you know, typically we would either start excavating or send someone into the slide, that's unsafe. And so these type of data and then these types of equipment give us a different perspective. I feel like there's even some information that we provide to for flooding, for example. There's a bunch of flooding in northeastern Oregon recently and over the winter. I had heard a story about an ODOT employee that was their house was flooded and they were stranded. And so just this type of data, again, gives us a different perspective, and so we can see from a place that's much safer. And so one, that's a great question. And two, I'm really excited that you are thinking about something like that, because that creates some meaning, and we tend to get focused a little bit on the points and lines and not necessarily the overall impact of the things that we capture. And I'm sure I missed something that maybe Audrey or Rhonda or Brett might want to fill in.
I'd like to piggyback on that, Chris. I've only worked for the DOT for maybe 2 or 3 years, and my background is not in civil engineering or anything, related to that at all. And my last job was working for this aerial mapping company, and it was really cool. I personally worked on the Oso landslide, and that was the most fatal landslide in American history. And I used to get to do other projects that were like really sexy, like I flew or I helped map Mayan ruins in Honduras that had never been mapped before. It like blew my mind. It was awesome. And then I wound up working for the DOT. And when I started thinking about if I wanted to work there, I was like, honestly, I don't really care about roads. Like, my background is in forestry and geology and aviation. Like that's what I want to do. That's like, it's full of thrills and adrenaline. It's like awesome. But then as I learned, like I'd always taken the road network for granted. Like, yeah, whatever. I drive highways to get cool places. Great. But this pandemic is almost like a dry run for the Cascadia subduction event. So everybody's stuck at home. Nobody can go anywhere, but the distribution network held up so that number one, you can actually drive to the grocery store. And then the grocery store actually has food in it, and surveying is a huge part of civil engineering. If we didn't have surveying, we would build the road and then we would find out that we're in the floodplain, and then it would flood and then you couldn't drive down the road, and the bridges would fall down, or when you would even try to build the bridges, they wouldn't line up, and it would just be total chaos without surveying. And the road network is something we drive every day. It's maintained pretty well, so we just kind of take it for granted. But like in the Cascadia subduction event, even the roads are going to get messed up, and probably all of the bridges are going to fall down. And so think of like how many bridges you drive just to get to the grocery store, much less the 18-wheeler that gets the food from wherever it is to the grocery store. That's going to be a major problem. So in these ways, by doing high quality surveying, we build roads and bridges that are more resilient toward these types of emergencies, that can be rebuilt faster to get, food and water and all this stuff into places when something really bad happens, like that subduction event.
I have one last thing to add about the Oso landslide, actually. My background also is in geology, and I worked for the mapping firm Brett and Chris worked for. Again, really cool data. They got to do things like map the Oso landslide. I find with ODOT there is a lot more purpose behind what I'm doing, or at least more purpose that I'm more directly aware of. Where, like Brett said, we're maintaining the infrastructure of our state. We can't connect to people or companies or anything without those roads, and so that's pretty huge. But with regard to the Oso landslide, the geology component of that is pretty huge, because there's actually aerial LiDAR that was collected of it previously, and when you view the LiDAR topographic maps, you're able to see those landscapes without any trees or any obstructions, and you can actually see that where historically it had slid before, and that it was an active area that was prone to this kind of danger and this kind of hazard. And so being able to look at the comparison, having that kind of visualization, you never find that in the field. These things are, miles long, these these dipped areas of landscape that show that this is a failing slope, something you would never be able to see from the perspective of being on the ground or even just taking a photo because the trees would be in the way. So being able to visualize things in a light that was, you know, previously unattainable has huge reaches for helping others and for planning this kind of safety and hazard assessment.
Can I just piggyback on that for just 1 second? That Julian, number one, beautiful question. Number two, usually when you are dealing with government agencies, you're inherently talking about helping people. So building infrastructure, those things are the cornerstones to kind of everything that emergencies happen around. So I think the bigger portion of that service piece is that I think as an ODOT, they don't work in anticipation of just emergency response, but these type of things come into play with just the daily things and how they set their standards, how they work things, how they do things, and the things that they put in place, so that emergency situations don't become bigger emergencies than they need to be. So I think with the helping people piece, the beauty about it is that it's proactive, that you're helping people before the problem ever exists. And really, if you're doing your job right, the people never really experience the pains that you saved them from.
Yeah, that was a great addition, RJ. I think I'd read somewhere, even about this COVID stuff, that if it hasn't affected the community as much as you thought it would, then really thank your public health agencies, you know, because they're doing their jobs essentially. So yeah, great connection there. Thank you.
Yeah, it was similar to the eclipse. You know, we did a ton of preparation to make sure nothing got jammed in the eclipse. And then afterwards, people was like, that was useless. There was no congestion. Like, actually, no, that was the point. You know, it's like having a good manager. When you have a good manager, you don't know it until you have a bad manager. And then you're like, holy moly, that was a really good manager. I wish I had that one back.
Okay, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. We thank you so much to our ODOT team. Thank you so much, teachers and students, for joining us. We really appreciate it. This was great insight. Students, if you have any more questions, you're more than welcome to email our ODOT team, Chris, Brett, Rhonda, and Audrey directly as well, and they can assist you guys with your questions.
I've got one more thing to add before we go. So this project, you know, we are constantly wondering if the way that we set up these projects, if it's too much for high schoolers. Because it's easy, you know, we've been working in this industry, it's easy for us to be like, oh, this is easy, they'll get it. But it's difficult to go back and think about, you know, what all of the things that we have done to build our knowledge and experience since high school, because it's been a while, you know. But with that in mind, like one of the best pieces of advice I ever got about, you know, whether I should take a certain job or go to a certain school or go to grad school or not or whatever, was from one of my mentors. Was a professor. He became the department chair, and I was ready to graduate college, and I had no idea what type of jobs to pursue or whatever. And he told me that if you're not terrified, that you're not taking a big enough step. So, you know, if the job that you think you're taking or the thing that you're about to do like doesn't worry you in the least, then it's like probably not a step towards growth. It's probably something you already know how to do pretty well. So we don't want this project to like terrify you, you know, but we did. We wanted to make it big, and this project's pretty difficult, you know, and we know that. But we're also here to support you. Yeah, if you're not terrified, or maybe not terrified, it's probably not a good word, but you probably should be, because this project is a lot of work. It's not easy. It's taken us like years to, you know, dial in this process so that we can go out there every month and just like bang it out. You know, you don't have to do it every month. You have to do it once, and you have a whole semester to do it, and you have support behind you as well. But If it wasn't terrifying, then it's not a big enough step. So I don't know, keep that in mind, I guess, as you try to make decisions throughout your life.
That's a really good point. And it also has you, it causes you to actually lean on your coworkers. So where your expertise doesn't hit, you have people around you that may have that skill set. So thank you for that, Brett.
And can I get you guys to just one more time give a high-level overview, just to give them a firmer understanding of kind of the relationship and the boundaries and distance between agency and consultant, just so that they understand roles?
That's a really good question, RJ. So we're going to treat you like a company. So normally that means like, hey, we're giving you money to do this. That implies that you don't need any help. You're an expert in this. You started a company to do this exact thing. That's why we're paying you. So we're going to formally treat you like that. However, we realize that, I mean, you're not a company, and that some of these things are really difficult to grapple with. So we will help you with some of these things, no doubt. And that'll also be formally documented in like the contract documents that we give you, which is also commonplace. You know, it's not like we're totally breaking the rules of you know, like an agency and contractor relationship, but we are here to help you. You can realistically expect more help from us than you would expect if you were a company out in the world contracting with agencies like us. But we will do our best to differentiate, to like let you know when, you know, yeah, we're going to help you with this, but you know, like normally we wouldn't. Like normally if you asked an agency to help you with a certain thing, it like might be embarrassing. We'll do our best to give you that knowledge, but we'll also do our best to like support you through this project so that you can learn and grow as much as possible.
Awesome. Okay, thanks guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Do we have any more comments before we take off? All right, everyone go ahead and unmute yourself and say thank you and goodbye to our ODOT team.
Thanks, ODOT.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe, you guys.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
And whoever was camping, have fun.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Camping.